Right, well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 207 of Retro Power Uncut. And we're in a bit of an unusual place to start with. We are in our machine room. And we don't come in here that much. It's not the most photogenic place we've got. We've got some rather old bits of equipment in here, and it's generally not the cleanest spot in the building. However, it is quite an important little bit of our facility, and we do use it quite a lot. And I have been today and yesterday. We're going to start with just bits and bobs I've been working on this week, just because it fits quite nicely in here. We thought we might start in here just because it was somewhere different to start the video. Yeah, in terms of machinery, we've probably covered it before, but we'll briefly cover it. We have a Colchester Triumph 2000 lathe, which needs a new clutch. It's soldering on, but the clutch is pretty slippy on startup, so I need to book a man to come out and change that, because to be quite honest, it looks a horrible job to get the clutch out of one of these. So I need to get that booked for replacement, well, replating the clutch on that. And then we have a TOS FNK25 turret mill, which is a really good old bit of kit. And to be precise, it cost me £110. Bought it many years ago. It cost more than that by the time I got it here, but I got it in an industrial auction, a liquidation sale from a foundry in South Wales. So it cost me a bit more by the time I got it back, but there's actually really nothing wrong with it particularly. It's actually a fairly decent bit of kit. There's a little bit of play in things, a little bit of wear in things, but nothing too drastic. Nothing you can't work round on that you'd have to work round on any other mill anyway. So yes, and that's where we're going to start, because this has been doing quite a lot of work. I'm going to go back to the brass hinges, which I have a pile of. I finally got back on to doing some work on these this week. In the latter part, we're Thursday lunchtime now. I spent yesterday, part of yesterday anyway, working on these. And I'm getting through the work on them gradually. They've been quite a big job. If it wasn't for the fact that they're very rare and quite important due to family connections with the owner, they really wouldn't be worth doing. But basically, most of the holes have needed brazing up to be remachined, and then obviously the outsides need reprofiling after that brazing. I've brazed them up with the TIG brazing rods. They've been brazed up. All of the pivot holes have needed brazing up, so they've been brazed. Then I've had to make a jig, tip the head on the mill, find the angles. Now, just to complicate things, the upper and lower hinges on a Mini the hinge pins are at different angles on the upper and lower hinges. One pair are at 5 degrees, one pair are at 10 degrees, and obviously they're handed. So the jig needs realigning for every hinge, which makes life fun. And none of the holes were the same size to start with, so centre finding on them was a bit of a mixture of science and art, really. But I think I found all the centres reasonably accurately. All the holes are brazed up. They've been rebored out to 1/4 inch to match the new pins. I've got to make the pins. That's one of the next jobs. We're making the pins in stainless. I actually bought a mini hinge repair kit for repairing these, but it was of no use at all because the bushes were only quite thin, and all the holes in the hinges were already worn beyond the point that the bushes would go out to. All bar one anyway. And then the pins are zinc plated steel, and the customer, who is one of our, I should hasten to add here, the customer that's given me these hinges to repair is a customer we're building a car for as well. It's not the sort of job I'd have taken on from just anywhere. It's just that we're actually building a car for this customer as well. So and there was a very good reason for wanting to do these hinges, so that's why we're doing them. Ordinarily, I'd have said buy some new ones. They've actually bought some new ones, but weren't happy because they're not brass, and you can't get brass ones, and they'd like to keep the original brass ones. So that's the plan. We gave one a little bit of a polish. I gave one a bit of a polish up just to check. There's going to be some little pinholes from the braze where the impurities are boiling out of the cast brass. Can't do much about that, but they're very happy with a little bit of patina left on these, so that'll work quite well. So I just gave one a polish just to check it was going to be a reasonable finish. Obviously you can see we're a little way away from a polish on these. At the moment, milling the slots out in the ends of these back, clearing out the braze to get them back to the correct dimension for the hinges. So these are all bushed now. These have all been drilled out and bushed. One of them's had to have an insert put in it. I mean, you can sort of see the condition when you look at that insert in the end of there, and where the actual hinge hole goes, you can see the sort of things we're dealing with. It's completely off centre to where the actual hinge hole had ended up, and was re-drilled at the wrong angle. We've also helicoiled some of the mounting holes because the threads were stripped in 2 of the mounting holes. Basically, multiple things were wrong with every piece of those hinges, so it's taken quite a while to get them all right. But we're very, very close now. I've got to mill out the last 2. And then make the pins, knurl the pins, press the pins in once polish all the halves, check that they all, linish them all flat, then press the pins in and do a final little polish, and then I think we're going to clear coat them with a direct metal clear coat, because the customer would like to keep them in polished brass, which will be a nice little thing on an early Mini. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, mucking about with bits of brass and making the mill do all sorts of strange angled things to try and work around those parts, and helicoiling and all sorts of other stuff like that. It's not all that exciting. So we're going to move on from in here. There's a couple of other jobs been done in here this week. There's a variety of people who've been using the lathe. It's been a busy tool this week, but we're going to move on to the fabrication workshop now and go and have a look at what's been going on in there. So we'll wander on past our CNC plasma table and our big old homebrewed 3D printer that doesn't do much these days. Now we've got the Bamboo Lab Carbon X1. The old printer doesn't do a lot. That only makes really big stuff that won't fit in the Carbon X1. So that's that. Come in here, a little bit noisy because we've got the booth running. I think we're going to go over to Interceptor actually. We'll go to Interceptor next. As you can see, Interceptor's moved house and looks a bit different because it's largely stripped down now. So that's one of the major things that's been going on, is Bobby and Stu have finished getting this body shell all stripped down, all the parts removed from it, so it's pretty much just the bare body shell now. And then the next phase is on the body shell has been the construction of the rotisserie mounts, which need to be pretty strong on this because it's a very heavy shell. Some of the re-engineering that was done elsewhere prior to us working on the car is a little bit overkill, and some of the chassis components are a lot thicker than they probably need to be and have added quite a lot of weight. So it's a pretty heavy shell now, and they weren't light to start with because the chassis were pretty over-engineered on these to start with anyway. So yeah, we're making sure the rotisserie mounts are quite robust and pick up quite well forward, pick up off the major structural mounting points on the shell, not the peripheral points. Normally we'd risk picking up off peripheral points on the front and rear sheet metal bodywork. This is just too heavy and too fragile on the sheet metal areas for that to work, so picking up off structural points. Talking of structural points, this will be an assembly that you won't have seen, certainly on any recent video, and possibly at all previously. Stu's been working on this. You will perhaps recall from a good while ago, couldn't even tell you how many months ago, Stu was doing the initial bits of fabrication on this structure, which won't have been very clear under the car, but now you can kind of see the idea of how this works. So this is the other mounting. The 4 mountings that hold this subframe into the car are there, 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 and there. Now these are all bushed. Polybush in Wales, in North Wales, I had to think then, were very, very good, very, very helpful, and actually made us a set of bushes for this, because they have previously manufactured a bushing that's ideal in terms of dimensions. It's a bushing I've used, aha, the booth is finished, quiet. It's a bushing that I've used previously on Opel Manta 400 lower rear arms, because the bushes for those are obsolete and were a very strange bush to start with. So I've actually used these bushes from Polybush before. I think they're from a Mercedes truck or something, I'm not actually quite sure. Polybush don't really seem to know what they're from. They were something they made years ago, and they've still got the mould tool for them. But they made us some in black. They're normally red. They made us some in black, which was very kind, and they made them in a softer shore hardness than standard as well. I think they made them for us in 50 shore off the top of my head, so that we've got a bit of compliance. And these, I'll find one that will come out. These aluminium top hats are just, there we go, just a little. They're just locating pieces, so all the structural work is done, and this is a kind of a standard procedure that we do on building anything like this. All the structural work is done with solid aluminium or steel bushes in place of the poly bushes, then there's no flex, nothing can be put in the wrong place, and we don't melt the bushes, which is also an obvious problem if you're welding near to them. But yeah, basically this subframe is mounted on those points and those points, and these two forward points are onto this fabricated structure here, which is bolted to the front end of this diff, which I believe is a forward 9-inch differential. So all that's modified from the original setup. The original Heights setup used a much more spindly mounting that had already been messed about with a lot and was no longer really in existence when we got the car. But that picked up across here and was on a tube. The Heights were more similar to that. The Heights, pardon the pun. The vertical displacement of the forward two mounting points was much higher up, and it was also a bit further rearward. And I was a bit concerned the torque reaction between the front and rear mounts wasn't particularly well distributed at that point. So moving these points inward and forward gives us a much nicer distribution of reactive forces on that subframe, and I'm much happier with the way we've got it mounted now. And also originally it was mounted on some ridiculously thin bushes. They were probably only a 3mm wall thickness, extremely hard, pretty much like a Delrin bush. I think it was a softer polymer, but it felt like Delrin. So we've mounting it this way, we've done it on some much thicker walled polyurethane bushings that are in a reasonably soft polyurethane, so it should give us a bit of compliance, a bit less noise transmission to the body shell. So yeah, that's the rear end, that's out. Stu's been working on getting that finished. He's now doing another piece of work, which is beefing up these mountings for the coilovers. I'm not happy with the strength of these. This is a 1/2-inch bolt in single shear, taking the weight of what is a very, very heavy car on the back of here. I'm not at all happy with those, so we're refabricating this area to put these into double shear and put a much stronger section over from the top of this box section. There'll be a buttress arrangement that comes over and carries a plate the other side of that and puts that bolt into double shear. We were going to upgrade the size of the bolts, but actually the double shear mount, I'm happy enough, will add enough that we don't then need to upgrade the bolts beyond the current 1/2-inch. So happy with that, that's all good. And as I say, Bobby is working on the front end of the car. I won't walk around there because Jamie won't get through, but I'll just gesticulate. But Bobby's working on the front of the car, doing some very nice bits of fabrication, making the front rotisserie, which, as I say, he's machined up crush tubes that will bolt into the lower wishbone mountings, and some inserts that go into the front bumper mountings, so that all the weight of the car is carried by the structural areas, the wishbone mountings, and then the steadies just go into the bumper mounts just to stop things flexing and bending, just to sort of take the bounce out of everything. So that's going to be very nearly ready to go on the rotisserie. So I think, all being well, with a few bits of finishing off in terms of underside welding, that's another point earlier this week. A lot of other underside welding was carried out. Bobby's been going around all of the areas underneath the car that needed further welding work doing, and has been getting all of those final areas welded up. There's a lot of threaded bosses for mounting pipes and all sorts of that sort of thing. So he's been getting all of those finished. Any finished welds that he could do with the car this way up, he's also done. So I think there's only a handful of welds left to finish under there once we get the car on the rotisserie, and then it's ready to go in for blast and zinc metal spray, and then over to the body shop guys. So that's a good point to be at. It's a point we've been waiting to get to for a while. So we're going to move on from there. And we're going to skim past Wasabi Audi project, because I told Jamie on Monday to make sure he got a time-lapse camera working on that, because I was going to be busy on the Audi. And then I have done nothing on the Audi because I've been busy with doing other things. I want to get onto the Audi. I think very soon we're going to have Bobby working on this as well. So then things will actually get moving forward. But my time seems to have been divided amongst many things this week, and consequently I haven't had time to get anything done on the Audi, which has infuriated me because I want to get it pushed forward a little bit. What has moved forward this week, and has then moved backwards again, as you can see at the moment, is the V12 E-Type. And you'll be able to see some rather nice work being done by Sam, actually, who is Andy's business partner at Vintage Machines. Sam's been here this week making the final welds between the forward sections of the quarter panels and the main sections of the quarter panels. There's a split in the panels there. Just the way they're made, that's a sensible way to place to put a join into that panel, just for various complex reasons I'm not going to go into now. For trying to shape that in one piece would be very difficult. you really need a split along the panel, but also putting a split in fore and aft at the point where the inflection in the panel shape occurs, or near that point, is also a good idea. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for a fall in terms of getting that panel the right shape and the right size. So so Sam's been here and the panels were overlapped and screwed together, as you saw them last week. He has then checked the fit, done some bits of titivating, if you like, on the fit to the door shut, and then scribed out the panel, marked that out, trimmed it, tacked it all together, planished up the tacks, double checked the fit, and then fully welded it all. So he's got that side welded, the far side welded, very happy with all that. Planished them up to make sure that the arch shape was all correct, and then Andy's been here this morning and picked up the rear end panel work for this car, taken that away in his van back down to Martin, down to their base, where they're going to do the final rear end trimming in and welds, and then quite a lot of planishing work to get all of the shape right after the welds are done. You have to realise that any welds put into structures like this cause shrinkage. They will change the shape of the panels, however beautiful they look. As soon as you put welds in there, the panel shape will change. This is one of the sort of popular myths people talking about, oh, you'll get distortion when you weld it. Yes, you will indeed get distortion when you weld it. It's not really distortion, you'll get shrinkage. And so it's very simple physics. You add metal at 1400 degrees, say, somewhere around there. When it cools down, it gets smaller. That's pretty standard. Things that get hot get bigger. So as it cools down, it gets smaller. That pulls the metal around it and creates a shrunken area. The only way to get that shrunken area to be not shrunken is to stretch it. And the normal way to stretch it is with a hammer and dolly. It can be done with an English wheel. It can be done with a planishing hammer. But normally, a handheld planishing hammer and dolly is sufficient. And if you have the expertise that Andy and Sam have in their fine hands, then the planishing hammer and dolly can be wielded with great success and can quite rapidly get the shape back to correct from the post-weld condition. So that's what's going on with that. I don't think we'll have that back for next week, but we may well have it back, I think, for the week after. We might have it for next week, but I think it'll be the week after that you see that back on the car, and then we can continue then and get all of the inner structure made and revise all this lot. You can sort of see what we've got here at the moment, and the fact that the standard Jaguar parts are a little bit all over the place. The way they've done it, sort of, they had one man designing that bit, a different man designing that bit, and then they went, oh no, they need to fit together, and sort of did something there. So we're kind of removing that panel, removing that panel, trimming this panel back to the parallel section, then we're going to refabricate all of that and make it all meet up with the new quarters. So that's what's going on with that. And then we'll go over to XJC. Progress on various fronts there. Matt has on the bench at the moment the front valance panel. It's quite a good little demonstration actually here of repair work. So this Tom was paint strippering this and cleaning this up yesterday and getting this all back to bare metal. And we've noticed that there was a reasonable amount of rust in these lap joints on the ends. These are the ends of the panel, they fit there, and there was quite a bit of rust in these lap joints at the ends of the panel. So Matt has then taken these panels off, taken both the ends off, but prior to taking them off he's made this little very rudimentary but perfectly good fit for purpose jig out of bits of scrap we've got lying around. Got some bits of box section, some bits of angle and some bits of sheet, basically made up a little jig that will locate the mounting holes on this panel in the right places, so that when he's repaired it all, the mounting holes are still in exactly the same positions as they were when this was last bolted onto the car. He's got these apart, he's then filling in, we're changing the front bumper mountings, and we're getting rid of the overrider mounts, so we're getting rid of these holes that were in the valance there, and a bit ugly, so Matt's just cut some discs out, and he's just tacked them in with the TIG, same on that one. You can see there he's got, in fact that's MIG tacked in actually, I tell a lie. So he's got that tacked in there. He's going to be getting that fully welded in and all planished up. And then he's planished out all the damage that was in the ends. I think he's still got to planish up this centre section a bit more because this had various dents and knocks in it. And then both of those ends will be welded back on. He'll plug weld up through the original spot weld holes where he's drilled the spot welds out. Get all that back into one piece. And that'll be repaired and can go back on the car, trial fit, and that's all good. Additionally, Matt's been finishing off the lead work on the back of this. He's been doing the lead work around the boot aperture, getting that all finished, and that's all done now. That was fairly close last week, but he's just, he had quite a lot of filing to do on that. I think he got most of the lead in last week, but he's been filing that this week and getting that all tidied up. Tom's just been doing some tweaks on the rear bumper. We noticed we had a couple of little areas of the rear bumper that we weren't quite happy with, a couple of waves in them. So Tom's been sorting that out. And I think at that point, we are basically done in terms of the external metalwork. So the next stages on this, I think Matt is going to be fitting the axle assemblies into this car and getting this basically to a rolling stage. So we can put the engine and gearbox in as well, and then start looking at the transmission mount, which, as I mentioned before, I think won't be a standard part, but and also fitting the HVAC unit, the vintage air HVAC unit, getting that fitted into the shell. That needs a few little bits of metalwork inside, possibly not quite as much bulkhead surgery as I thought it was going to need, which is good. So that's a pleasant find, but I'm told it might not need quite as much surgery as we thought. So that's all good. Nice progress on that. And then I think I'm just going to pick up on a couple of comments. Actually, I don't know whether Cal's going to pick up on this as well. Cal hasn't done his bit of the video yet, but I picked up on a couple of comments last week regarding the Jaguar XJ, the Jaguar X300 AJ16 engine rebuild and the crankshaft. Possibly the video clips that were in last week were not in necessarily the right order to portray the sequence of events that was going on there. The crank was indeed, as various people picked up, tight in that particular video clip that was shown there. That had been plastic gauged, and the clearances are correct. If anything, they're actually at the slightly wider end of correct. But the crank was not oiled at that stage because we didn't want to have any oil in the plastic gauge while doing the plastic gauge. So it was only sat on some graphogen assembly lube. And the bearing journals are so big on that crank that it does actually take quite a lot to get it moving. We also had a slight mark on one of the main bearings. One of them had been damaged in transit. Now, we'd scraped that extremely carefully because that's the last set of standard size main AJ16 main bearings that we can find in the whole of the UK. Unless somebody else can point me in the direction of some. We know most of the usual engine component suppliers in the UK, and none of them can get any of those bearings. So this is the sort of fix we're in with that engine. We actually have to build another AJ16 for this XJC, which is what has prompted me to talk about this. We have to build another one, a supercharged one for this. And to give you an idea of the magnitude of the task of what should be a simple engine rebuild, we're actually going to have the crankshaft in the engine for this. Undoubtedly, it will be undamaged and won't need grinding, but we're going to have to grind it anyway, because the only main bearings that are available are undersized ones, so we'll have to grind the crank to match those bearings. And then for the big end bearings, they're totally unavailable, apart from one manufacturer, King Bearings, who actually make a bearing which I suspect is for another application, but they list it for the AJ16 engine, but they're actually the wrong size. They have too much clearance, and what we've elected to do going forward is actually grind the crank to the bearing size for that. So we're going to, well, obviously with suitable clearance, but we've got some undersized King bearings, and we're then going to grind the crank to match those bearings. So it's not quite a walk in the park, and it's not quite as simple as it might first appear. The crank fitment in an AJ16 has become a bit of a problem just because there are no parts available for those engines at all. And I've had a few people asking me why there are no parts available for those engines, and it's quite simple. They never went wrong. They're so over-engineered that they just don't go wrong. Nothing really goes wrong or wears out on them. So there was no demand for aftermarket parts for them at all. And then, of course, they were never used in racing or competition or any form of enthusiastic use at all, really. So there was never any aftermarket support for them. So once Jaguar ran out of spare parts, nothing's available. As I say, there are one or two parts which are available that happen to be cross matches against a component for a different engine, but those are not very many. They're few and far between. So it's a bit of a tricky area, really, and that's one of the reasons why we were messing around a little bit in terms of crank fitments. But the main bearings are good in that engine. There is no problem there. I think the sequence of events and the way it was videoed probably didn't convey that very well, in that at the point that Jamie did the footage on that, the crank was tight. However, if you do some footage now, it is not tight and it has the exact same set of bearings in it. So that's the situation with that. But I just thought I'd fill that in because I picked up, I know there's a lot of eagle-eyed viewers watching our channel and a lot of people picking up on everything we do, which is good, but that one grated with me a little bit. We do make mistakes, but that wasn't one of them. And I'd noticed a few people pick up on it, so I thought I'd better address it. At that point, I'm going to hand over to Mark and let him show you around the body shop, because we have a Cosworth progressing quite nicely in there. So over to Mark.
Rookie numbers.
Oh, just getting the voice warmed up, guys. It's hard being a legend. All right. Back this week with what I promised. Almost didn't get it done, but the car now, it's got polyurethane direct, PU for short inside, we talked about there. It's just the paint we used, dead durable, sticks to bare metal, but we did epoxy prime this on the inside. So yeah, Gaz hit it with like a Dove grey, which is very similar to what Ford used inside. And then he went back over with the Moonstone in the bits you'll see if you did lift the carpet. Better than factory, as we say. But we did have a delay on the stamp kit, but it came in the end. So then we got it back on the rotisserie. Jamie's got footage of Gaz applying the Raptor underneath, which is just like a truck bed liner, but we can thin it down a bit to put it through the Schutz gun and the 2.5 SATA. So yeah, so that's now ready. We're going to get it back out of here now. Now it's all watertight. We can wet flat this 800 because we've already 320'd the primer, and then it's back in here, masked up, and final paint. Ain't going to be next week because Gaz is away, because Gaz is painting this one. He's going to Scotland for a week, so he's off. Then I'm off the week after, so you probably see it in paint in about 2 weeks' time. So yeah, so then we go into the body shop, see what the guys are up to. Here they are, the misfits. Also legends in my eye, also legends. Steve, people probably say Steveism, but he is. So yeah, so now we're on to Jensen Interceptor panels, because the car's going onto a rotisserie now. They're just building it. It's actually be blasted in the next coming weeks. I think they've just got a bit of seam welding left on it, and Nat's probably told you. Cosy parts are all ready to go in to be painted, all wet flatted, prepped. We've also got some Den stuff in. Jaguar, is it XJR? I think it's come all the way from Spain for us to do our magic on it. So they've got to be primered. Also done some bits for Rich. You'll probably see in Rich's video for some interior. I think it was a Capri, is it Consulate or something? Consulate. Yeah, so I've done blasted all the seat frames, dash parts, black gloss PU'd all them. So yeah, been busy week. We're going to solder on with these. These have got to go through epoxy, the Interceptor. Just got to get them all nice bare metal. So obviously they've been on the car for a while it's been in mock-up and stuff. So yeah, that's it this week. So yeah, see you next time.
So thank you, Mark, for that. And at that point, I think it's probably time for me to hand over to Cal, say bye-bye for this week, see you in a week's time, and see what's going on in the assembly shop and down at the den.
Thank you very much, Nat. Right, we're going to start with Project Kuma, Mark 1 Escort, and you will notice that the body shop guys have briefly had it back in there to do the satin black paint behind the grille. So we are getting into finishing touches territory. Also, interior-wise, there was a few bits we were just finishing off. So we've now printed the column shroud for this, which is going to be the last piece that goes away for leather. Dean's just done the 3D printed cage corners and the handbrake grip. And then Richard has just done the final piece of the parcel shelf. So actually, it's worth a little recap on the parcel shelf on these. It's kind of a combination of different bits. So you can buy fiberglass reproductions of the original shelf, but our shelf is much deeper because it kind of integrates some of the structure of the bulkhead and the strut tops for the independent rear suspension. So what we do is we use the fiberglass back section that is available, cut down, a flat panel to form the forward section, and then where the air vents are, the sort of cabin air outlet is through the rear of the parcel shelf and then out into the boot shut. So we've done essentially like a 3D printed bezel piece that's wrapped in Alcantara, which is the bit Richard has just done, and then there's a laser cut steel sort of finishing panel that has some sort of round holes in it, which we did as a bit of a nod to the round instruments on the dash, but in the back. And then we use some speaker grill cloth behind that. So you still get really good airflow through it, but it doesn't obviously look like a row of holes that you can see all the way through. So that's a little bit of detail on that. On the Allegros, we got hold of, I think I mentioned before, we were rebuilding the rear lights. One of the lenses, I think it was one of the brake light lenses, was a little bit cloudy, but otherwise they were actually in remarkably good shape. And I mentioned that there was a surprising number of rear lamps on eBay, and actually, before we went ahead and bought a whole rear light, we realised there was a brand new old stock brake light lens on there. So we got hold of that. That allowed us to build up the rest of the rear lights. Just had to make up the little foam gaskets for where they fit, get seal against the body, fit the rear lights. So they're in now. And then we've just been on with some general assembly stuff. So the little bulkhead closing plates that go on the, close up the scuttle area. Now we've finished all the wiper installation, they could go in because we don't need access to there anymore. Started putting some of the audio components in, so rear speakers are in, amplifiers in at least one of the two. Going to hold fire on the front speakers at the minute because we've still got to fit the Bailey channel, I think it's called, around the glass, and finish fitting the actual glass into the window regulators. And that aperture where the speaker goes does give you a little bit more clearance to get into because they're very slim doors. There's not a lot of access space, so I'm going to hold fire on putting the door speakers in. But as you'll have seen over the past weeks and months, Richard's kind of there with 90% of the interior, so a lot of it is just going through the motions of fitting it, but we're kind of leaving things to be in the right order so we don't shoot ourselves in the foot with accessing things that we will later need access to. So that's where we're at with them. Anthony's been on with quite a bit of tying up loose ends wiring wise on the Camaro, so he's got it jacked up at the minute, so we've got good access under the wings to finish off all the wiring to the headlights. So we've swapped them over. They come as standard with a trailing wire with an H4 connector on these headlights, but I'm not too happy with the fact that most of the available H4 connectors are not fully sealed, and the connector that was on the back of them was, although it had a boot on it, you would debate whether you could call it fully sealed, and they're in an area that gets quite a lot of water to it. So we've put some three-way Deutsch DT connectors on those. The side light and indicator, which just comes as just spades on them with a rubber boot, which in no way would keep them waterproof. So we've swapped them out for two-way DTM connectors on those. So we've got some fully sealed connectors on all of them. He's done the connection to the trinary switch on the aircon dryer. So that is basically a double pressure switch that has two circuits to it which switch at different pressure points. One of them switches the compressor, not directly in this case, it essentially switches the PDM, tells the PDM that the pressure is okay, and that will then turn on the aircon compressor. But that basically is a safety switch, so if the pressure drops too low, the compressor doesn't work, just so it doesn't get damaged, and if it goes too high, it cuts the pressure out so it doesn't blow a hose on the system or overpressure any components of the system. And then it has a separate switch circuit in it, a different pressure, which switches the fan on. And it's interesting actually when you pressurise up the system and start seeing it working, it's amazing how quickly the pressure changes according to reducing the temperature with the fan. Now this is fairly obvious when you think about it, that's why refrigerant is used. It has a very big pressure change according to temperature, or temperature change according to pressure, which is what causes the coldness when you depressurise it through the evaporator. But it's interesting watching it when you see the fan, you see the pressure go up and up and up and up and up, and then the fan kicks in and literally it just goes straight down, and then the fan kicks out again. So yeah, he's been doing the wiring to that, just securing the rest of the front legs of the loom. He's mounted now the little engine relay box and comms port just under the passenger side of the dash. So yeah, nicely tying up loose ends. There's not a lot wiring wise left to do on this now, and then I'll probably be called into action to do the PDM program for it, which on this shouldn't be overly complicated. It's not a massively ambitious one in terms of wiring complication. We should have the machine center console back any day soon, and then Richard can crack on with upholstering the console, and yeah, we should be able to get the interior together in pretty short order. Another thing just to mention over there, Project Churchill, we've been making up the steering downlink. So when we did the dry build, we just had a temporary downlink in, but there was loads of room around it, so we knew there wouldn't be any space issues. But we needed to make the final one because it needs a flexible joint in it, because the front subframe is rubber mounted on reasonably compliant bushes, so therefore because the rack is mounted to the subframe, that means there's relative movement between the column and the rack, and therefore there needs to be some kind of movement in the downlink. So we're basically using I think it's a modified version of a Range Rover Classic downlink, which has got a rubber, I suppose they'd call it a rag joint crudely. Quite nice on cars like that where they're just cruisers to have that slight compliance as well, just to keep a little bit of the steering wheel kind of vibration slightly dulled down as well. But on the proper joints of the type we're using, there's like little metal pegs on there that mean that if the rubberized joint ever fails, the pegs engage and you don't lose steering. And then there's like a central pin that runs in a bush from one side of the UJ to the other, or one side of the joint to the other, should I say. So that if, actually it is a UJ, it's a UJ with a rag joint on the top of it, and therefore it means that if the rag joint fails, the UJ can't just flop down because there's a centralising pin on there that runs in a bush. So that's where we're at with that, just making that up. I think on that note, I'm going to hand over to the guys in the CAD den, because I know they've got a fair bit to talk about, and I will say a few things that have been on with are looking so good. I loved how the sort of fairly simple but clean and effective dash they've been working on for the XJC. The Saab is looking incredible now. I think we've finally nailed that. And then we've just done some tentative work for the Aston DBS, which is also shaping up to be a very cool project. So I'll hand over to George and Luke to show you what they've been up to.
Hi guys, welcome back to another week up in the CAD Cave. It's been a little while now since we last spoke to you, but Cal's been doing a brilliant job with informing you what we've been doing up here. I'm actually going to start with something I did last week, which was the updates on the Portofino dash. A lot of changes on that, kind of bringing it back to sort of similar to a Series 1, a lot of more original elements in it. I think that's looking really, really good. We'll splice in a couple of renders of that. That's been sent off to the client, and I believe he's pretty happy with it. So next steps on that is kind of figuring out how we're going to make everything, what everything's going to be made of as well, because that's quite a big thing here at the minute. Do we 3D print stuff? Do we subcontract it? Do we try to use the routers to manufacture stuff in-house? So yeah, getting to a really exciting point with that. And then touching on this week's work, at the end of last week, I scanned the Aston on most recent project. I love that car. I think it looks beautiful. It's got American muscle car kind of touches to it. It's got a lot of like classic British touches to it as well. And generally speaking, there's not a lot you want to change about the outside of that car. However, in saying that, there are two main places on that car which absolutely need changing. The first being the rear kind of, I don't even know what you want to call it, because it's not a diffuser, it's like a valance. It houses the exhaust in the back, and it just completely looks like an afterthought. It looks like they designed the entire car and they went, yeah, we forgot about that part, and so they've had to now bond this bit of sheet metal onto the back, and it just doesn't look very good. And then other than that, it's the chin spot at the front. They did later on come with one, but it's a bit uninspiring, and we can do a lot better job on that. And at the minute, it just looks like it's got a really big underbite. So I've been working on that. That's looking really good in my eyes. I'm going to try get renders out to the client of that by the end of this week. Hopefully he loves it, and then hopefully that can get the ball rolling on that. I'm going to hand over to George now, who's going to talk you through some of the spicy Saab stuff that he's been on with.
Okay, hello. Thank you, Luke, for handing over. So yeah, I've been working on Saab for the last, I don't even know how long it's been, to be honest. It's been months at this point. But we're finally getting to the end of the finalisation of kind of all the design. So this is the roughed out, what we're going to end up with. Obviously, there's a lot of refinement left to go on and all that kind of stuff, but these are some of the renders we've done to show the client kind of where we're at, if he's happy with kind of where we're at in the design in general. And then if he is, then we'll go on to the kind of finalising all the surfacing, which takes ages. So we want to be happy with that. What that does result in though is we've got kind of renders which have kind of got a really nice kind of this section, which is what has been modelled by us. And then we don't actually model the whole car. So a lot of it is scan data, and scan data is a bit kind of rough and ready. Like, as you can see, I'll get Jimmy to patch some in, but it's really kind of not very nice to look at. But we don't really have the time and the kind of budget to be modelling everything on the car. So what we do is cheat the system, which is photoshopping it after the fact. So this is like the raw render. Obviously spend a bit of time getting the lighting right, and kind of making it look how we want to look. But then I'll come back in after the fact in Photoshop and then do effectively this, which is just tidying up all the rough edges, all the shadows that aren't looking quite right, which we will sort out when the design's finalised. And then, yeah, it's just working through all of these renders, kind of tidying them up, sorting them out, making sure kind of, obviously that looks a bit kind of crap, frankly. But after we've spent a little bit of time in Photoshop, that makes it look a lot more refined. And then we'll send these all to the client, make sure he's happy. Fingers crossed, he'll come back and be like, yeah, perfect. Often that's not the case, as I don't know if you remember from last week, Cal was talking about the 2 different wing options we gave him. We was both really happy with them, sent them to him, and he was like, no, I hate them both. And now we've ended up with a ducktail. And we're kind of at a point now where we're all quite liking that, which there's another rear view of it. Obviously, some of these renders have been clean, some of them haven't. I will send all these to Jamie so he can patch them in with some nice bit of B-roll or something, I don't know. But yeah, so that's what I've been on, general Saabiness, and yeah, moving on to the kind of less fun stage of refining it all and getting the surfacing really nice. Back to Cal.
Thank you very much, guys. And I'm going to go down the den now and show you what's been going on down there. Welcome back to the den. Let's have a little wander over here and we shall have a look at what Nick has been up to. So actually, this has ended up being an absolutely prime example of why we're pushing the preventative maintenance on cars of this sort of era. So as I mentioned last week, this car's come up to us from Spain to basically give it a really thorough inspection, a report back to the owner, and then in that report contained various suggestions on work that needed to be done and work that it might be wise to do. And among the things that we thought might be wise to do would be to take the timing chain covers off and have a look at the condition of the tensioner sliders. I can't think of the correct name off the top of my head. Because they're quite well known for, there was a few things on these V8s. In the early ones, they had plastic cam chain tensioner sliders, I don't know what they're called. And then the impeller on the water pumps were plastic. And they had Nickel coating on the cylinder bores, and all of those things were problematic. Now this one doesn't seem to have suffered any problems with the sulfur attacking the Nickel liners on the bores. It's also had previously a brand new water pump, so that's obviously been done quite recently. But we suggested we pull the timing chain covers off to have a look at the tensioners. The customer said, yeah, go ahead, and sure enough, there are massive cracks in several of them. So definitely was well worth putting the time into that. So now we're going to go through, put new tensioners in the cam chain train. Don't know if we're doing a new chain. Are you doing a new cam chain in this, Nick?
Yeah, chains.
Yeah, okay, so basically go, yeah. So we're going to go through and do new guides was the word I was after, which Nick has just politely informed me of. But yeah, we're going to do cam chain, tensioner guides, the whole lot. So yeah, well worth digging into that. Also, I don't know if Mark's already mentioned, but the bumpers from this are off and being painted up at Retro Power. They were sort of the worst of the letdown areas paintwork wise. A few scuffs and the like. I think it lives a bit of a life wending its way through tight spaces in Madrid, so bumpers have got the odd scrape. The super cool BMW 2002, we completed all the inspection work as far as we could on this. One thing we needed a little bit more time to look into was the electrics, because there were various electrical faults on it. And none of them were due to glaringly obvious issues. So we've requested essentially a day of time to really dig into it a little bit more, which is what we're doing at the moment on this, and try and get to the bottom of some of the slightly odd electrical gremlins. So I'll mention more about that another time when we have actually properly dug into it and got to the bottom of those faults. So that's where we're at with that. I'll make my way this way. Over here, and this is probably a big difference between here and Retro Power, is we've got by my standards, a brand new car in here. And actually, visibly on the outer surfaces of it, it is in extremely good condition, virtually indistinguishable from new in most areas. And the owner is basically keen to get the underside up to a similar standard as the outside. Now, as we know from working on cars over the years, and as a lot of people might know, the sort of coatings that original equipment manufacturers use on some of the underbody components isn't necessarily great in terms of longevity. So subframe components, suspension components, often you find they get surface rust very quickly, and in some cases when it comes to subframe components, wishbones, that sort of thing, you can have much worse corrosion issues. In fact, I think Jaguar Land Rover over the years, sort of recent years, 10 years or so, they've had a few models where they've been particularly well known for subframes or suspension arms corroding to the point of failure. So again, it's kind of preventative stuff. We're going to be looking at what improved surface finishing processes we can do on the rear subframe and other items that are showing premature surface corrosion. And then we're going to talk to the owner and go through what options we can offer to improve the level of corrosion protection on those items. And see if he wants to go ahead with that. And it's likely to be, on things like the subframe, it's probably going to be zinc metal spray powder coat techniques we've learned up at Retro Power. Fasteners will probably go with zinc nickel plating that's then over coated with Xylan coating over the top of that. But yeah, we're going to give some suggestions and see where we go with that. But really cool car, I have to say. I'm not massively into newer cars, as you probably imagine, but there are a few that kind of catch my eye, and I have to say, having this one in the workshop made me realise that those F-types are a pretty attractive looking machine. Probably a little bit underrated, dare I say. We'll pop through here. So on the last Saturday, we had the Jaguar Enthusiast Club, or some members of the Jaguar Enthusiast Club here, and they had a fantastic time. We basically congregated down here. I think there was a group of 15 congregated here. I gave them a bit of a tour around all of the projects we'd got going on in here whilst everybody gathered. Had some teas and coffees up here in the lounge area, television on showing some relevant YouTube videos, and then I kind of gather everybody together, do a little talk about Retro Power and what's led up to the taking on of the Den, and then we all head up to Retro Power, do probably a 90-ish minute tour of Retro Power, split with me and Nat. We basically split the group into two, so he takes 7 or 8, I take 7 or 8, do the tour up here, then head back down here, and they had sandwiches and refreshments here afterwards, and then headed home. I think it was a great day had by all. So if you want to do that with your car club, just drop us an email, info@thedenautomotive.co.uk, we'll see if we can accommodate. On that note, I can see Richard is busy doing his thing over there, so I'm going to hand over to Richard and he can tell you what he's been up to this week.
How's it, everybody? Glad to have you back. Welcome back. Yeah, so in the Den upholstery shop, we are still busy with the Ford Capri. A couple of quotations went out, so fingers crossed. Some more comes in, but it was all about foam pads and more foam pads and more foam pads. So I've received the second frame back, so that will get a bit of a reinforcing on there. The foam pads are ready. We've talked about that. They'll just go on there now. So it's now simply me just attaching that to them. We've done the patterning, we've done the sampling, we've done the tweaking. I'm really happy with that. And I did start cutting, but now, so these are now all laminated, a few of them of the front seats. We'll concentrate on the front seats first. In the meantime, something cool is we a little bit up and down and just throwing ideas around. And that's going to be the accent strip. So we got this really cool perforation that's actually in these little stripes, and we're mimicking the 3 original sort of flute lines that was down the seat, but now it's just a much more modern perforation with a bit of stitching. That was Carl's idea, came out really nice. I made a quick sample again. We like to test everything. But that's going to look really cool. We're happy with it. The customer is happy with it. So I can't wait to finish this so that everybody can see it, because I think it's going to look really nice. We've signed off on the thread colors. That can be a bit iffy. I'll show you a thread color sample book. It's like, it's not I want black. It's which one of the 13 shades of black would you like? So that's just one, and as you can see, there's all the colors of the rainbow plus more. And as simple as it might seem, by the time you bring a piece of leather to that and you match it up, to something that you think would be okay, by the time you actually stitch it to the leather, it either comes out darker or lighter than what you anticipated. So you always got to be careful. We've managed to hit the mark on the past 2 or 3 jobs where between me and Carl we go and we measure, and then we check with our eyes, and then and it really came out, because it's 2 things. Sometimes you want an exact match because it's just a bit of an accent, or the top stitch is there for a technical reason. It needs to flatten a seam for us to go around a corner or something, or you want a little bit of a contrast, not too much, just to bring it out a little bit. So all those decisions, and this is all that goes on in the background, all these things that we cross the T's and dot the I's, and just check and recheck and order thread and order other thread until we get it right. But the results are absolutely amazing. So yeah, can't wait to show you. Other thing I've been busy with is today I got border foam pads, so I did the dash topper. So Mark and the guys did a really cracking job. That looks brand new. They sandblasted. We masked the whole dash topper up. They sandblasted all of that, and they did a bit of direct paint. So now my glue sticks very well on there, so that won't delaminate. So that looks like a brand new dash topper. So by the time it's in the vehicle and it's got its vents and the little binnacle at the top here, steering wheel, that's going to look really class. So really simple. These type of things, when you look at it like this, it goes, nah, okay, until it goes into, and it's got all the other components with it, then it comes out really nice. So that one's done. That's going to be wrapped up. Another thing, we have done the little rear bench seat, and I think if I make a little bit of space, Jamie will be able to get those into shot. Let's stick that down there. So it's like a before and a work in progress, if I can call it that. So it was a really simple flat seat, bit of two-tone that matched up with the original door cards, that light stripe that you saw there. So that actually was like a swoop through the whole car. Very cool, but still the back seat, just a flat bench. And then with the flutes. So what we're going to do here is bring our little fluted stripes in, the more modern version, and then what I did was I just did a couple of raised bits down the center as like a normal car, a little bit raised, and then a little bit bolsters. This big massive hole there and there, that's where the wheel arch sits, and that protrudes quite a bit over here. So thought, let me mimic that. Bulge here, bulge there, and that's just going to give us a bit of definition and give that seat some nice shape. So it's going to at least look a little bit more comfortable to sit on. We didn't want to mess around with heights because these cars don't have a lot of space, headroom in the back. So we kept to exactly the same, just the bolsters and the center panel where you don't really sit, where it doesn't matter, to give it that definition. So I'll be, where we now, Thursday, I'll start patterning tomorrow, and hopefully, yeah, cutting, sewing next week. So by the end of next week, you might see some seat covers, maybe 1 or 2 that's fitted, so I can't wait. I'll see you guys next week.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. And that's it for today. We'll join you next week to see what's been going on. Have a good weekend, or the rest of it.